Dishonesty from the politicised General Teaching Council of Scotland, and my secret weapon. Welcome to part 2 of my report of the saga of my General Teaching Council of Scotland case, which concluded last week. If you haven't watched part 1, it's probably best to go and watch that on the YouTube channel before watching this one. Right, I'm going to start off going back just a few years, 2017 I think, to the school where I was working. The school where I was working communicated to me that they thought that stating that abortion is immoral outside of school, for example in a letter to a newspaper or on Facebook or whatever, they told me that they thought that could contravene the standards of the General Teaching Council of Scotland. Now when I heard that I thought, surely not, that's ridiculous. The GTCS can't tell teachers that stating the views of the mainstream Christian churches and lots of other people as well is against the standards. So I thought, right, what do I do here? So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go and check with GTCS. So I wrote to them and said, can I come and discuss this with you, please? And they said, yes. So I went and had a meeting with a lady at their mansion in Edinburgh. Now, there's some other issues as well, other views as well that we talked about, but the central one for me was this: abortion is immoral. So I basically said to this lady, saying that abortion is immoral, does that contravene your standards? And she said, well, it could do. It could be seen as contravening our standards. I said, wow, I'm very, very surprised to hear this. I said, look, I've come here seeking clarification, and that's what you've given to me. You've given me clarification, so thanks very much. Could you just put that in writing for me, please? And she said, no, I'd rather not do that. I don't think that's necessary. Well, I said, I think it's very necessary. I mean, if that's your interpretation of the standards, then I assume the standards apply to everyone and not just me. Other teachers in Scotland need to know that this is the way GTCS is thinking. So I'd like this on paper. I'm not sure I can do that. So the meeting ended, and I emailed them after and said, look, this is what was said in the meeting. I mean, if you want to apologise and say you didn't really mean that, okay, that's absolutely great. But if it is your view that stating that abortion is immoral could contravene your professional standards, in other words, you could get struck off for it, potentially, then I think all teachers in Scotland need to know. In fact, the wider public in Scotland needs to know that that's the sort of principles you operate by. So can you put it on paper? And they squirmed and squirmed and squirmed, but I kept pushing, and eventually I got it. They did send a letter saying yes, saying that abortion is immoral in some contexts, we're still outside of school. For example, letter to a newspaper on a Facebook page could be seen as contravening our standards. So I thought, right, this is absolutely outrageous. So I spoke to various people about it, actually let the Catholic Bishop's Office know. And they did a press release about it. And the Daily Mail and the Times got in touch with me, and I told them the story. And they then phoned the General Teaching Council of Scotland to get their side of the story. Now, throughout this, I'd made it very clear I was talking about outside school, a letter to a newspaper, or on a Facebook page, say, personal Facebook page. Right, when one of the newspapers phoned GTCS, GTCS said to them, oh, we thought he was talking about in school. There's no way that could possibly be true. So, I mean, that's just not true. That's what they told. They're just trying to fob off the newspapers, protect their own reputation, avoid a bad news story by being dishonest. Right, the other newspaper, they said to them, oh, when he said outside school, we thought he meant addressing a crowd of parents at the school gate. I mean, come on, how ridiculous can you get? I'd said letter to newspaper or Facebook page. So again, sheer dishonesty so that GTCS could cover its tracks and save face. When I complained to GTCS about it, but you can imagine what's going to happen next. When nothing happened, they couldn't really do anything about it. It was just ignored. Now, that dishonesty, I mean, that was, might have been both the same person at GTCS. I'm not saying like everyone at GTCS is dishonest or the whole organisation is, but on that occasion, there was clear dishonesty, and when I complained about it, it was not sorted out, which I thought was not great, let's put it that way. But even worse than that was the fact they'd stated that saying abortion is immoral could be seen as contravening their standards, which I thought was utterly, utterly outrageous, to have that sort of bias within a professional body. Now, on top of that, I made a video recently about their professional standard of you have to adopt the philosophy of social justice. So to be a teacher in Scotland, you have to agree with the social justice philosophy, which is a political philosophy. Tends to be a left-leaning, liberal, progressive philosophy. If you look at GTCS explaining what they mean by it, it's things like the gender pay gap, etc. So it's a philosophy to which I do not subscribe, and a lot of other teachers in Scotland don't either. But GTCS says to be a teacher, you have to subscribe to the views, basically the SNP. There's the sort of things the SNP believes. That's what teachers have to believe. So then these 2 points, saying abortion's immoral, contravenes the standards, you have to support social justice, they prove that the General Teaching Council for Scotland is incapable of operating in a neutral way. It's incapable of distinguishing between a valid spectrum of views and sort of genuinely objectionable or offensive or vulgar or whatever content. Now, the problem this leads to is in a democracy, if you've got something like the teaching profession, that's an awful lot of people in Scotland. That's tens of thousands of people. Now, if they're all feeling we can only express a certain range of political views, otherwise we might be struck off, what does that do to the democratic process in Scotland? Well, it undermines it. It chips away at open democratic processes. So that's my view of the General Teaching Council for Scotland, biased and therefore unfit to perform their regulatory function. Now, when I went into my hearing, I didn't exactly take a sort of win friends and influence people type of approach. I went in and told them straight all these things. I said GTCS is intolerant, biased, etc. I said they were abusing their power. Told it all straight. I said I would also carry on saying the things I'd already said. I still held the views and I would carry on saying them. So to some people this might have sounded like a suicide strategy, as though I was trying to get struck off. I wasn't at all. I was defending myself as well as I can, but I was also going to tell them everything I thought about them. Did I think it would change the views of the panel? I wasn't particularly optimistic. Did I think it would strike home at all and challenge GTCS? Not really. Did I want to say it for the media present and just for the record? Yes. But the other reason I said all these things is at the beginning they made me take an oath. They made me promise before Almighty God to tell the truth. So I thought, right, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And just to give you a quick flavour of it, I mean, the opening of my defence, I said this. This case will reveal nothing about my fitness to teach. It will, however, reveal the extent to which GTCS is politicised, prejudiced, intolerant of diversity of thought, opposed to freedom of speech and hostile to socially conservative views. I refuse to submit to any threats or action by GTCS and will continue to articulate my beliefs publicly. I already have done throughout this case and even through this week. Whatever the decision is, I will continue to state the same views. Why am I doing this? I said to them. Is it just because I'm awkward? I said no. There's 3 principles involved. Number 1, these views are really important for the well-being of children, adults and wider society. So it's crucial that people articulate them. Number 2, defending freedom of speech. Other teachers also will look at this case, will be significant for them. And for wider society, every time people submit to threats and don't say what they really believe, then that's chipping away at our open democratic society. And that's not going to happen in this case. And number 3 is more personal. If I were to have submitted to all the threats I'd been subjected to over the years, I would now be saying nothing about some of my most heartfelt views. I would just be parroting official lines and maybe progressing in my career up to who knows what level. But inside I would have just withered away. I would become a sort of hollowed out individual, and I can't live like that. So I said to the panel, I said, I'm not here to apologise. I'm not here to tell you I've reformed. I'm not here asking for mercy. I said, do you think my views are outlandish? GTCS thinks that because they're in the progressive secular liberal bubble that is the Scottish educational establishment. And you may be thinking, oh, that's not true. There's hardly anyone who thinks what you think. I mean, you're just a sort of bizarre outlier. I said, well, why do you think that is? This is what happens to you if you do express these views. So you've got no way of knowing how many people agree with me because almost everyone else thinks best to play safe and not say them. So that was my opening salvo to GTCS. Now it's time to move on, right? So the content of the complaint against me, the allegations against me, it was basically, I said 2 women, 2 lesbians shouldn't have a baby together using a sperm donor because children have got the right to be brought up by a mother and father. That was the heart of the matter. That's exactly what the allegations said. I'd said this. So my secret weapon came in at this point. And my secret weapon was the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So I read it to them. I said, this is what the Catechism of the Catholic Church said. If you want to check it, you can go to the Vatican website and look at number 2376. But it says this: techniques that entail the dissociation of husband and wife by the intrusion of a person other than the couple, donation of sperm, for example, are gravely immoral. These techniques, heterologous, artificial insemination and fertilization, infringe the child's right to be born of a father and mother known to him and bound to each other by marriage. And I really laid it out very firmly to them that what I said in the video, the central message, was exactly what it says in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So what I said was exactly the same as the Catholic Church believes. Now, I'm not a Catholic, but at this point I would like to send a message of thanks to the Catholic Church for laying out what it believes so clearly. So when someone like me ends up in this sort of situation, I can point to the text and say, look, this is what the Catholic Church believes. Lots of other churches, I can't do that. So they can't. I can't get that support from them. Now, some churches I've even heard taking the opposite view, where people say to the church leaders, please don't put our beliefs on the website because it'll get us into trouble at work. And even some church leaders might say, oh, okay, right, we won't put them on there, we'll keep them quiet. Churches that take that line, well, they're not going to be able to support openly my position, whereas the Catholic Church's statement was absolutely fantastic for me. So I quoted that to them, tried to make it absolutely clear that what you're saying is a teacher cannot say what the official teachings of the Catholic Church say. So I presented the contrast between the philosophy of Scottish education and the teaching of the Catholic Church. And said, if you look at this particular point, the Scottish Government sex education resources, right from nursery, the message is any number of men and women, any combination, can get together and have a child, and that's just great. We celebrate diverse family forms. They're all equal and different, and that's just wonderful. And then 5 to 8 year olds, they introduce artificial insemination, all these sort of things, alongside giving equal billing to heterosexual sexual intercourse. So whereas my belief is that mum and dad, have sex, have children brought up by mum and dad. That's the ideal. The Scottish government, Scottish schools, apart from Catholic schools maybe, explicitly teach the opposite. They say, no, that's not the ideal. Any and every combination is just as good, and that's a fact. That's what children are taught. So I said to them, it just, that's the difference in opinions. The Scottish educational establishment is completely on one side, the side the SNP wants it to be on. I'm on the other side, the side of the Catholic Church, lots of other religions and Christian denominations as well. And how much of an impact did that have? I don't know. But it certainly felt like my secret weapon. I thought it was a very powerful point to make. Right, I was asked a few questions, though, about how my beliefs would affect children. So at one point I was asked, what about if a child watched my video while they were still developing their own opinions? What a question. What a question. As though the person was assuming, oh, I've really got him here. How's he going to get out of this one? If a growing child hears the teaching of the Catholic Church, what damage will that do to his well-being? How confusing will that be for him? So I answered and said, well, that question really says it all, doesn't it? The fact that you think people need protecting from one side of the argument, meanwhile, the other side of the argument is taught in lesson after lesson throughout the curriculum, throughout the entire school journey, says it all. Another challenge that was put to me was, if pupils know that I think if they're from a same-sex family, then the outcomes are going to tend to be less positive. It will make them think, oh, there's no point trying, I'm never going to be any good, I'm just going to be miserable, and that's not very good, is it? So I said to them, hang on a minute. The Scottish Government never stops talking about the attainment gap. And what that's about, it's saying that pupils in poorer areas tend to do less well. So does anyone say, well, if you go around saying pupils in less well-off areas don't do as well, it's going to make them depressed and they're going to think, oh, I'm never going to amount to anything, no point me even trying. So, why is this argument not applied there? It's just special pleading. My view that a certain group of young people are going to tend to have less good outcomes. Apparently that makes them all depressed and they give up. Whereas any other group that's singled out, and they say, right, there's a concern about the outcomes for this group, well, that's like official policy for it. This is just special pleading. I tried to explain that point to more than one person during the proceedings, and let's just say it wasn't easy to get people to understand it, I would say. But anyway, I thought that was a good response to that. Right, another challenge put to me on the basis of these sort of unsavory views that I apparently hold. Someone said, you probably discriminate against people because you think they're more likely to have mental health problems. So I would discriminate against the children of same-sex parents because I thought there was an increased risk of mental health problems. So I said I would not discriminate against them. I wouldn't discriminate in any way. But let's imagine I did. What form would that discrimination take? Might it be keeping a bit more of an eye on them? Giving them a bit more encouragement? Just having a check up how they're getting along? Is that what you've got in mind? Is that your idea of discrimination that I'm here facing the possibility of being struck off for making? I mean, it was just ridiculous. And the other thing we had was this argument that the fact that you believe that same-sex parenting is not right and is not the ideal for children, then because you believe that, you would discriminate against children of same-sex parents and their parents. Not might, not could, you would discriminate against them. Now, I thought that was quite a strange claim. I thought, what's the time frame? Does that mean you would discriminate against them within the first week? Well, what if the pupil's in your class for a year? Does that mean you would definitely discriminate against them within that year, or might it take 2 years? It says you would discriminate against their parents. What? Maybe you might only see the parents once. Maybe I wouldn't have a chance to discriminate against them. I mean, so the whole thing didn't make sense. But this assumption that because you believe something's wrong, you're going to discriminate against people, you're going to treat people badly, was a ridiculous assertion, and I said so in the most uncertain terms. But then partway through the case, I was sent some legal documents of some other cases that their solicitor was going to refer to. And I looked at it. One of them was the case of Felix Nogoyle, who was a student kicked off a sociology course for stating his disapproval of same-sex marriage. Now, this was his appeal. He actually got the judge overturned the decision. So their solicitor sent this to me, and she was going to refer to it to strengthen her case. And even more bizarrely too, I was told which passages would be referred to. This is one of the passages that GTCS's solicitor was going to use to strengthen their case. The university wrongly confused the expression of religious views with the notion of discrimination. The mere expression of views on theological grounds does not necessarily connote that the person expressing such views will discriminate on such grounds. So there's the legal precedent. There's the judgment from that case. So that judge is quite clearly saying you cannot make the assumption that GTCS makes in allegation after allegation against me. And they give me the paperwork and point me to the section of the judgment that points this out. It makes no sense to me. I don't know what was going on. But anyway, the case didn't actually get to the stage where I would have pointed that out to them. But I was certainly ready to. Now, the other thing they said was, if you've got a child of same-sex parents, even though you don't do anything differently, even though you don't discriminate against them, even though you don't say anything, just the fact that they know what you think, will make them uncomfortable, it'll upset them, or whatever. And I said, do you realise there's children who sit in lessons in schools in Scotland who don't need to speculate about what the teachers think. They don't need to read it on social media outside the class because they're teaching exactly what they think, because it's the curriculum. And some of those children sit there thinking, these are not the values of my family. They contradict them. These are not the values of my church. These are not the values of my religion. This is not what the imam says at the mosque. And they just have to sit there and put up with it, being taught it day after day after day. And we've had a lot of children, young people contact us and say just how they're fed up of being force-fed basically the government's messages in lesson after lesson after lesson. We have teachers saying the same thing. We have parents saying the same thing as well. And again, it's the special case. That's all okay. When it comes to someone with socially conservative views, then just the fact that they're aware that someone that might disagree with some views of their family, suddenly that's really traumatizing for them. Just sheer special pleading. Okay, that's the end for part 2. Part 3 will be coming out in a couple of days. It's going to be called Inflammatory Jiggery Pokery and Intolerance Statistics, and it will include some of the frankly laughable lines of arguments that were produced against me. And then the last one is going to be called The Process is the Punishment and the Hollow Victory. So watch this space, and I'll tell you the rest of the story soon. Thanks for watching.